So just to, as we've got guests here, we'll go through the normal housekeeping procedures. First of all, thank you everyone for coming out today. Just a couple of points. If we have mobile phones turned to silent or off. Toilets, if you should need them, are through the doors at the back, down the corridor leading right. I've not been informed of any fire drills, so if the fire alarm does go, take it as a genuine one. The closest evacuation point is through the back doors, straight on, and the stairs are on your left going down to the rear car park. And the muster point then is in front of the police station on the opposite side of the high street. We'll move on to the minutes. So confirm as a true record the minutes of the meeting held on the 31st of March 2022. I will propose them because I was here. It is a bit tricky for them.
Chairman, if I may, we haven't had any comments from any of the other members to say that they're not satisfied.
Okay, thank you. Councillor John? Are there any declarations of interest? No urgent business? You, Mr. Widgecombe? So we'll move on to the substantive part of why we're here this morning. Report of the Director of Neighbourhoods. Application to determine an application for a variation of the premises licence under section 34 of the Licensing Act 2003 for Fullness Bay Holiday Park, Fullness Lane, Thorne, Isle of Wight. Can I have a licensing officer to summarise the report, please?
An application made by Park Resorts Limited to vary the premises licence at Thorness Bay Holiday Park was made on the 1st of June 2022. The applicant seeks to extend the hours that regulated entertainment is permitted both indoors and outdoors, and to extend the hours for the sale of alcohol by bringing the start time forward for this activity. The application also requests the approval of a new site plan showing the location of outdoor activities and the addition of a new horse box bar. Page 2 of the report contains a table which shows the current permitted licence for activities and timings, and the proposed new timings if that activity is subject to change. Please note the timings for indoor sports on that table should read no change. The Licensing Act requires applications to be advertised and for a 28-day consultation to take place. Any person may make representations and they will be considered valid if relevant to the licensing objectives. During the consultation, 2 valid representations were received, and these relate to the licensing objective of the prevention of public nuisance, specifically in relation to noise that the objectors claim to experience from activities that go on site. Copies of these representations can be found at Appendix 3 and 4 of the report. Whilst both of these are valid representations and are relevant to why we are here today, members are asked to note 2 matters of importance. Point 1 is that today is a hearing to determine an application to vary a licence. It is not a review of the existing licence. Members are asked to focus your attentions on the additional activities and times being applied for, and not the existing conditions or the current permitted activities. The second point is that the part of the application is technically already authorised by virtue of the Live Music Act. The Live Music Act permits live music to take place between 8 AM and 11 PM on any day on premises where the sale of alcohol is permitted by way of a premises licence and where the audience is less than 500. provided the premises is open for the sale of alcohol at the time. The applicant seeks to extend their entertainment activities that are already authorised until 7 p.m. until 10 p.m. and this, with the exception of the boxing and wrestling activity, therefore falls within the scope of the Live Music Act. Nevertheless, the concerns raised by the objectors are relevant in so much as they relate to the potential increase of noise from the site, part of which could be associated with larger groups of people gathering outside with the addition of the horsebox bar. Members will be required to draw a distinction between those activities already permitted by virtue of the Live Music Act, effectively all live music, and the potential for noise nuisance to occur from the increased gathering of people in the outside from the additional activities requested. Under the Live Music Act, conditions on a licence do not have effect until after 11 p.m. However, in this case, the applicant's solicitor has kindly put forward 3 conditions which they have stated they are agreeable to having attached to the varied licence if granted, and they are happy for these conditions to take effect from 7 p.m. when the extended activities begin. In summary, these consist of a noise management plan condition, along with contact details being made available to local residents, and Miss Moss advises that her client would agree to limiting the additional activity times for the period starting 3 weeks before Good Friday, going through until the end of October, but Miss Moss clarified that this agreement would mean that activities could take place every evening as per the provisions of the Live Music Act, and that her clients were not agreeing to the weekend nights only. Again, this condition would only apply to those additional hours requested for outdoor regulated entertainment under this variation application, and the existing hours for external regulated entertainment remain permitted all year round as per the existing licence. The Environmental Health Department provided a no adverse comment response to the application. Mr. Wootton, the senior officer who considered the application, is here today to assist members with any additional information you may require and to answer any questions you may have. Mr. Wootton has been in discussions throughout the week with Miss Moss around the proposed wording of a noise management plan condition and the content of the plan. Information in relation to the ongoing discussions around the noise plan was circulated yesterday, and Mr. Wootton will be able to update you further on this shortly. The objectors, who unfortunately can't be here today, have been advised of the conditions offered by the applicant, and they are aware that noise management plan discussions are continuing. Whilst during discussions with the objectors, they stated a wish to see greater concessions being made by the applicant in terms of the additional hours they are requesting, the sole basis of their objection is not wanting to be disturbed by the activities that go on site. Therefore, if a noise management plan can be agreed and implemented to the satisfaction of both the applicant and the Environmental Health Department, then this should achieve the objector's wish of not being disturbed later into the evening. The committee are therefore being asked to consider the following today: whether to amend the hours for indoor boxing and wrestling from the current time of 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. to 10:30 a.m. to 1 a.m., an increase of 6 hours. Whether to grant permission for the activity of boxing and wrestling outside from 11 a.m. until 10 p.m, as this does not fall within the provisions of the Live Music Act. Whether to increase the start time for outdoor films from 2 p.m. till 11 a.m. Whether to grant the extension requested for the sale of alcohol, that being to bring the start time forward by 1 hour to 10 a.m. Monday to Saturday and 11 a.m. on Sundays. And finally, whether to approve the new site plan, copies of which have been given to all parties this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go first. Are there any questions from the committee? Councillor Bacon.
Thank you. Just a couple of points of clarification. The noise plan that's being talked about, if that is to be made part of any decision, would that only apply to the additional hours? Because I note you say that this isn't a review, so we're not looking at the existing license as such in any way. So how can the noise plan apply to that? leave that one, then ask my second question.
I think discussions have been taking place this morning with regards to the conditioning around the noise management plan. Certainly the applicant has agreed that the noise management plan would take effect in relation to the additional hours, so from 7 p.m. onwards. But because they've offered that up, that can be attached to the premises licence. We couldn't impose that because of the Live Music Act, but because the applicant has kindly put that forward, that can be imposed on the licence. And it will cover the non-music activities.
Thank you. And the second question is, the Live Music Act relates to an audience limit of 500. What's the deemed audience for the park? I know it a little, and I assume there are more than 500 people staying most of the time. So how are we assured? How can we say the Live Music Act applies if there's a potential audience on site, a number of people greater than 500?
I have actually covered that in my summing up. It's likely to be unlikely that at any time the audience would be greater than 500, but with a noise management plan in place, that in itself would provide the assurances to responsible authorities on how the licence holder would manage the noise levels if the audience were exceeded. Having visited,
I suppose my question is, how do you determine who's the audience if this is audible across the site? Does it have to be who's standing there facing the stage? What's the definition of audience for these purposes?
Okay, yeah, there is a definition of audience. And
Councillor Bacon, I think probably I think we'll have to check, and perhaps I can ask our solicitor just to check that quickly. I believe that the definition relates to those people who are actually physically experiencing the entertainment, have actually gone there, not people who have to be in the area and listening to it. If that was the case, the Live Music Act possibly couldn't exceed for lots of premises.
Starting at the bottom of page 9, I noticed that the police had not responded when they were written. Has there been any follow-up with them since, or has anyone actually sought to get a response from?
no, we haven't. There wasn't a representation made by the police, but then again, this isn't a review hearing. We haven't had reports of antisocial behaviour or crime and disorder on the site. So on that basis, you know, it's not exceptional that the police wouldn't have made a comment in relation to an application that relates to entertainment activities and really falls within the remit of the Environmental Health Department to make those comments.
On page 22, which is Annex 2, I note in point 5 that we refer to a specific age by number of years rather than as determined by statute. So is there a reason we do this? I know that statute is considering changes to a number of conditions regarding these sorts of activities. They do change from time to time, as is the case at the moment, for example, with tobacco purchasing. So do we normally put in a reference to the statute that determines a condition, or do we ourselves override that of a specific age?
So the conditions that you see on Annex 2 are the conditions that the licence is currently subject to. These conditions would have been put by the applicant probably going back to the time when the Licensing Act came in and the licence was converted and varied over to the new regime. We have moved forward. The legal age is still 18 in order to purchase alcohol, but we have Challenge 21 policy that's moved to the Challenge 25, but that doesn't mean that that would necessarily have to be reflected on the Annex 2 condition at this time. It would be down to the operator to decide how they train their staff, the due diligence measures, and whether or not they have a Challenge 21 or Challenge 25 policy in place.
Would it not be better if this embraced that challenge policy and also reflected the legal statute for age, which is varied at any time? So, you know, is our policy, I guess it's a policy question on these issues, normally refer to age, given that we're talking about 18. If that was to be changed by statute to 20, that then require the document back. Better at the outset if we simply refer to the statute to that condition. It's varied from time to time by national statute.
Thanks, Councillor Chairman. I think you make a very valid point. At the moment, we're not able to vary the licence because that's not what the application's for. There is a mandatory condition now, which is set by statute, that all premises licences are required to have an age verification policy attached to their licence, and that is a new piece of legislation to come in for 7 or 8 years ago, part of the Licensing Act, and that is a mandatory and statutory requirement that all premises have. So that would override that condition that it is a legal offence to sell alcohol to under 18s, but by virtue of the mandatory conditions that's set by the Licensing Act, every licensed premises are required to have an age verification policy, which is what.
For us as the norm, any change to statute would automatically override this condition.
And the problem we have with lots of premises licenses, as they are at the moment, when the regime changed in 2005, premises license, what was on an old entertainment license or a liquor license, if that's what the phrase, were automatically granted grandfather's rights and were placed on new premises. A lot of these conditions that we're seeing on licenses now are historical conditions which have been overwritten or overridden by changes in legislation with the mandatory condition and age verification.
But just for clarity, on a new application which didn't have grandfathered in, for a statute rather than defining a specific
You wouldn't see that condition, you'll just see a mandatory condition that says that these premises have to have an age verification policy.
I think the other questions I had are probably not for this forum, but I noticed the rateable value was still at the 400,000 level.
I'm not aware of why that question. Obviously, you have other information that we may not have, Councillor John.
Not for this forum, but I just would noted it. That was
the rateable value states what fee they pay.
I know. Thank you.
Councillor Bacon.
Just one other question relating to the Live Music Act. How closely related to the flows from the answer you gave earlier, how closely related to the audience is the alcohol sale? Is alcohol sale on any site relevant, or as we're looking at permitting indoor and outdoor activity, so being permitted, do the performances indoors relate to the sale of alcohol indoors? The question really is, does the ability to have music outdoors under the Live Music Act relate to the sale of alcohol outdoors? So if there were no sales outdoors, Live Music Act would not.
It depends on the plan premises. So if the license itself shows the plan with the buildings and the land around it, boundary line to show that the outside area is also licensed, and it doesn't matter whether or not the sale of alcohol is taking place indoors only, the entire site is licensed, and therefore that is the licensed premises.
Carry on, Councillor John.
I had one that was very similar to that, slightly different wording for my question, but very similar, about the licensing and the implications of the Music Act, is which you may partly have answered, in that if alcohol is sold inside, are there any restrictions on the transport of the alcohol outside?
No, if the license, as I say, if the license shows plan being the site licensed in its entirety, provided there is, well, no, even the consumption wouldn't be an issue, would it? Because if you've got the entire plan shown as the licensed premises, then it doesn't matter where the alcohol's being sold, that the entire site is licensed, so consumption would be taking place on site, and there's no limitations to that.
So alcohol, for example, extreme and another. One extreme might be that alcohol brought onto the site could be consumed at the music venue, and alcohol brought inside the building could be consumed anywhere on the camp, basically.
Potentially, but in order for the Live Music Act to apply, the site would have to be licensed and with a premises license authorising the sale of that alcohol. I don't know what the specific rules are with regards to Fullness, with regards to campers and where they consume their own bought alcohol, but the fact is there is a premises licence that authorises the sale of alcohol on that site, and by virtue of that, the Live Music Act applies.
So the issue is about the sale, not about the point of consumption.
Yes.
For example, you could purchase it within the time window and consume it outside of the time window, and that would be acceptable.
Well, yes. Strange, but yes.
Lots of places don't have that allowance. So.
Yeah.
Can't have it by the pool. I'm just trying to understand the question, Councillor Jarman, in as much as that if we liken it to a normal pub premises, where a person purchases a pint of beer in the bar, he is unable to take that off of the premises unless he's got off sales. He has to consume it within inside the purchase of the pub. With regards to the premises as we're talking about with Fullness Day Holiday Camp, obviously the ground and the extent of the licence area is greater and has other activities, areas within that purpose of the line. So they would be able to purchase that drink and consume it within the red line at any time after the time of being purchased. What they can't do is take it outside of, unless they've got off sales. I'm not sure off sales. On and off sales. So that would allow them to take it back to, yeah. They would be able to take that back to their caravan and consume it.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Councillor John. I've got a couple of questions, but I think they're more probably aimed towards the applicant than the officers, so I'll hang fire on those until we've heard from the applicant. So if I could now ask the applicant to present their case. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Imogen Moss. This is James Bradshaw, who's the GM. I'm from Poppleton Allen. I'm not going to regurgitate the application. Andrea has done a sterling job of outlining that for us. I suppose the first point to come to is what we're applying for. So we're applying to regularise the entertainment hours and alcohol hours internally. Police haven't objected, which would tell you that there's no crime and disorder issue there with the current operation of the alcohol licensed venues on Thorne Bay Holiday Park and the way that they operate currently. So that internal extension is to regularise the hours, provide some flexibility. There's also the external box bar, which we're requesting for the sale of alcohol Monday to Sunday, 1100 to 2300. Again, this is to alleviate some of the pressure from the restaurant. It's in an external area where people eat at the moment. There's tables and chairs out there. It's in the location of the stage. It's an additional facility for residents of the holiday park and the owners that live at the holiday park. Again, if there were any issues from a crime and disorder point of view, we would have expected to see a police objection, which there is none. The extension of the regulated entertainment externally is really to just formalise something that we can already do under the Live Music Act by virtue of the fact that it's a workplace as well. Don't forget, we've got the workplace exemption. So that would also be applicable here. It's a class as a beer garden, class as an external area, it's a place where somebody works. So that is also something to take into consideration. The kind of entertainment that they want to put on the external stage is low level, family orientated. The films are UPG. It's there to provide light level ambient entertainment to people who are already going to be in that beer garden area. It provides something for people who don't necessarily want to go to entertainment that is being held internally because it's not for them. It's something very relaxed, very low level. So looking also at the external entertainment, you'll appreciate during the pandemic, premises lost up to 50% of the internal use of their venues. So external areas across the board are becoming really important to places like holiday parks. It's also the case that post-COVID, both guests and staff prefer to be outside. So having that external facility is of use to both staff and to guests post-COVID. The site already offer external entertainment by virtue of what is currently on their licence and by way of the Live Music Act. They wouldn't expect to have swathes and swathes of people sat out there. I went there last night to go and visit. It's not a huge, vast area. And where the tables and things are seated, you're not going to see over 500 people. It's just not got the facility there for it. Environmental Health have kindly provided response to some of the objectors. You'll have seen that there's been no noise complaints made to Environmental Health in the past 10 years. We're not aware of any noise complaints, except I think there was one on a Facebook page which was dealt with sharply by way of reducing the music level, and that was back in August 2020, which, as you can imagine, was at the height of the pandemic. That's the reason they were using the external area, and I think it was dealt with swiftly in so much as they were listened to and that external entertainment was turned down. And that is essentially what the noise management plan will be there to do, to regularise that kind of action that the holiday park can take to alleviate any concerns in respect of noise management. It's better to, in a way, have the external entertainment licensed because we've got then the ability to enforce under the licence. You as a licensing authority have direct enforcement by virtue of the premises licence. We've got conditions there that the premises will have to comply with, which when you're relying purely on the Live Music Act, that's just not a facility that's there. So it makes sense, both as an operator and also working to be a good neighbour, to licence it so that we've got that protection for us and them there. You've also got to bear in mind that there's a huge amount of owners that we have that have caravans on site. James himself lives on site. These people will not accept noise nuisance when they're going there to be, in a beautifully idyllic part of the Isle of Wight. They won't want noise. We're not going to want, as an operator, to annoy our own owners, our own guests. That's just not what this is about. It's about providing low-level family entertainment for guests who are on park, who want to remain in that lovely external area. The stage itself, I went and had a look at it yesterday, is directed towards the restaurant. Then you've got speakers on the restaurant directed out to sea. it's not directed deliberately at any residents or anything like that, and the restaurant itself will provide automatically a buffer for noise. When I went and visited last night again, we listened to the music, went around the corner, within 150 metres it was inaudible, and that was at the normal level. We would play it just as background music, or if they had an acoustic singer, for example, as the sun sets, just to have a wind down for people who are staying on holiday park. You're not looking at Glastonbury style entertainment here, it really is family entertainment that we're looking at. I think it's just important that, and I kind of want to labour the point that Andrew has already succinctly made, that this is not a review of what we have currently. There's a case of Taylor versus Manchester. An application to vary never triggers a general review of the licence. The focus is the subject of the variation. Now, looking at the objections, and we have obviously not had a history of noise here. So we've worked really hard and we've liaised with Mark and Andrea to try and address the concerns of the objectors at the outset. But there is no evidence here of any noise issues because we haven't had any complaints from environmental health, and there's not a huge swathe of noise objections or noise complaints coming into Park daily. There just isn't that background to this. So one of the objections mentions hen and stag do's. That's just not something Thorne Bay Holiday Park does. Again, family orientated. I don't think you even as a business accept it's prohibited to have mass group bookings. It's just, again, just laying out the style of operation of Thorne Bay Holiday Park. It is family orientated. The point as well that I'd like to make is we have offered 3 additional conditions. Those conditions, I'm going to have to go on my phone because we've just agreed the noise one this morning, so do forgive me for going on the telephone. It feels a bit strange to be doing it. So the conditions that we've offered are a contact telephone number and email address to be made available to local residents. Now, the point of that is, we get a call in. We hope that we wouldn't, because the whole point of the noise management plan is there to prevent any public nuisance in the first place. However, on the off chance that there is an issue, that telephone number is there so that we can react immediately. It will be to on-site park security, which is manned 24 hours a day. So we can react to anything straight away. It will be quicker, in fairness, than environmental health will be able to react to it, because we can pick up the phone, deal with it, go out, do some active listening and respond with the appropriate measures. We've also specified that for the additional hours requested for outdoor regulated entertainment, that this be used between the period of 3 weeks before Good Friday and the end of October each year. Now that sounds a bit strange, 3 weeks before the end of Good Friday. That's purely because the way that school holidays work really early last year, so we're just trying to factor that in and provide some flexibility. And then I suppose the most importantly, we've agreed a condition with Mark this morning about there'll be a noise management plan for outdoor regulated entertainment only for the additional hours requested. Will be agreed with the environmental health officer. The noise management plan will be reviewed and updated if required at regular intervals, and a copy provided to the environmental health officer. The additional hours for regulated entertainment outdoors shall not be implemented until the noise management plan has been agreed with environmental health. Now, I would hope that that condition would provide comfort to everybody that we are serious when we say, you know, despite the fact that we haven't had any noise complaints for 10 years, despite the fact we haven't had a swathe of noise complaints into Park, we are taking what we've been told very seriously, and we're investing significant time and resources into developing the noise management plan and making sure that we've got something there that would prevent public nuisance, therefore upholding the licensing objectives. Now, again, labouring the point somewhat, again, in respect of this isn't a review of the licence, which is why the conditions are phrased and worded in the way that they are. We've got to look to section 34 of the Licensing Act, and in Patterson's, when you look at the footnotes, it talks about the fact that when you're considering an application, the logic of the application is you think about the likely effect of the application. So we're looking at the likely effect of the horse box bar, the outdoor extension for regulated entertainment, the internal extension for regulated entertainment. And that's why we've phrased those conditions and phrased the noise management plan in the way that we have. Because we haven't had, and again, we haven't had any representations from responsible authorities. I think that's it from me. If you've got any questions, which I'm sure you will have, we will endeavour to answer those for you.
Thank you very much. I'll go first on this one. As I said, these probably refer more to you. We got this the plan fairly late. We haven't really had a good enough chance to study it. I mean, not that there's a lot to study, but you answered one of my questions, which was the orientation of the stage, which direction it was pointing in. Which direction is the Horsebox bar facing?
Horsebox bar, now James, correct me if I'm wrong, but when I went and visited yesterday, where that Horsebox bar is located, the actual opening where people will be served from faces the restaurant.
No, it's the same orientation.
So it's all going
basically
into the park. Yeah.
Fine. My second question is people who purchase alcohol inside in the main building, what route do they take from the main building, generally speaking, because people wander all over the place, obviously. But there's probably a general route that they would take to get from the building to the outside area.
Again, remembering that they've already got licensed areas for sale of alcohol here, and there haven't been any issues, but James is probably best placed to answer that question for you.
Hello, yeah. So the actual outside the main bar is a decking area. On that decking area is one set of steps that takes you down. I would say pretty much everybody goes that route because you're going to have to go a long way to get outside. The actual restaurant's got 3 exits out of it as well onto that decking. So that would be where predominantly.
Thank you. And my final question for the time being, you've applied for these hours for that period of time. How often, and having sat on lots of these committees, it's often the case that people apply for more than they actually use. Excuse me. How often are you going to be using these new hours? You know,
it will be dependent on when peak time is for trade. It will also be dependent, quite frankly, on the weather, to be honest, because obviously being an external area, you know, just talking about the external entertainment for now, it's weather dependent, which is why we've applied Monday through Sunday. We might not use it every single day of the week. In fact, it's probably unlikely, I would say, James, to you.
Yeah, so in terms of how ideally, it's normally one midweek day, depending on the weather, because you're trying to affect that break for the people that are there for the 5 days, and then normally a Friday and a Saturday. But again, it depends on the weather in terms of where we sit. And just on the entertainment point, the majority of the entertainment that we provide is our own on-site troopers who are vocalists. So it's not, it gives us that flexibility to move the day depending on the weather at that sort of time.
So it's just being able to, you can imagine with a holiday park, you know, James made a good point to me earlier. It's like, well, Friday and Saturday when you're on holiday is just, it's not a weekend, is it? The whole time you're away is a weekend. So it's just having that flexibility. It's like, oh, it's rained for 3 days, but we, you know, today's sunny. Today we can put on our ambient sunset vocalist or U-rated movie for kids. Yeah.
yeah, thank you. I suspected that was probably the case. I mean, making the point of external entertainment in bad weather, it wouldn't make sense to even entertain doing that anyway. But yeah, no, thank you. Questions from the committee? Councillor John first. All right. Okay. Councillor Bacon then, please.
Thank you. Just 3 points. I was interested when you say you prohibit mass group bookings. What do you call a mass group booking?
So to give an example of it, we no longer operate sports tours anymore on our parks across park-in resorts. We don't do that. But what we would, our terms prohibit any group from booking outside of our main tour operators. So centrally, we have a team that manages a group booking, and they have set terms and conditions in relation to that. So typically, Now we don't have sports tours at all. Stag and hen parties are an absolute no-go. They've never been permitted on any of our parks at any point. But the only thing that if they try, they breach our terms. So we would, and so for example, if they ghosted onto our park, so they booked separately and arrived, we would consider that a group booking.
Thank you. Second question relates to the Horsebox Bar, which you said relates to the operation, or is intended to relate to the operation of the restaurant and the eating area. What are the hours of the restaurant?
In terms of alcohol sale or food, we serve food between 9 and 5. Sorry, 9 and 9. Sorry, 9 till 9 is our food hours at the moment.
Just to point out, it's currently licensed for, let's have a look, alcohol, Monday to Saturday 11 till 1, Sunday 12 till midnight. You'll have there on the licence, whatever is on the licence is what that restaurant is currently licensed for.
Yeah, now my question related to when food.
Oh, when food, my apologies, I didn't hear that bit, sorry.
And the other one, I think I've got my pen and head on today, but you referred to light level ambient entertainment being the intention. I just wondered how boxing and wrestling fits in with that.
So in truth, we don't provide boxing and wrestling outdoors and have really done it in the past, but it's just if ever we needed to going forward, for example, we have wrestling on our parks throughout the summer indoors. So we do, it's midday, it's like, to be fair, it's licensed, so it's and it is your very typical Punch and Judy sort of wrestling that takes place indoors, and it's normally we do it on a Tuesday, and it's sort of a midweek activity. If that provider ever were in a position where they could do it outside, which at the moment they're not because of the way they operate, it would be nice to be able to offer that, but it would only ever be a daytime event that we did. We're not looking to host anything crazy.
Thank you.
Anybody else got any questions for the applicants? Looking at stony faces, I'll take it as a no. Or blank faces. I'll pass over to any of the responsible authorities. We have environmental health here. Is there anybody else? I don't think so. Does anyone want to say anything at this point from that side of the room?
Thank you, Chairman. I think everything from my point of view has been covered by both Andrea and the applicant. Thank you. I think suffice to say I'm happy with the noise management condition, and if the committee is minded to issue licence with that condition on, we're going to, after the meeting, get down to the nitty-gritty of the actual noise management plan itself, and hopefully we will have that finalised shortly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for environmental health? No.
Chairman, can I just ask a question? Mark, are you able to make sure that our legal has got a copy of those agreed conditions for them to consider when they deliberate? Thank you.
I've got an email from yesterday afternoon, but I understand that they've been updated.
Been updated, so.
No, thank you for ensuring that. Well, none of the objectors are able to attend today. So really, we're into summing up, I think. Is there anything that anyone else would like to say in summing up? It comes to the applicant next, I think, yeah.
Thank you. It's just for some sort of points of clarification and just some reminders for everybody when you go away and make your decision. So again, we've spoken about it's family-based park, family-based entertainment, no representations from environmental health, no representations from police. And the reason I point that out is you've got the national guidance. So looking at 9.12 about the fact that when it comes to crime and disorder, you police are there, and if police should have any issues, they would have made an objection. And the same with 9.15 of the national guidance about they're the prime responsible authority for prevention of public nuisance, and there's no representation from them either. 9.3 and 9.4, evidence-based decision making, how we're going to promote the licensing objectives. You have a broad spectrum to determine the application. You can determine just part of it, you could determine all of it. I would ask you please to grant all of it in light of the conditions that we put forward and the evidence that's to you, especially in light of the evidence from environmental health that there being no complaints to them in 10 years. The point I'd like to make as well is if there are any noise issues, it doesn't work out well for us. It really doesn't, because I have to trek all the way from Nottingham again to come down and sit here for a licensing review. Park Dean Resorts categorically don't want that. It's not good for their reputation, it's not good for their other parks, and it's not good for their wallet either. That's just not something that they're going to want to have to happen. So they're going to do their utmost to be compliant with the conditions that they put forward. The point of that there is to protect them. It helps them regulate their park, make sure they're compliant, and they want to be good neighbours at the end of the day. This is about striking a balance between a really important business on the Isle of Wight and the local neighbourhood, and we want to strike that balance. We want to work with people. We're here for partnership working. That's what we're about, and I think James Wood, he's a really good example of that actually as a general manager at Fullness Holiday Park. There's also the fact that there's the power of under the Noise Act, fixed penalty notices if there's noise issues, noise abatement notice, that's serious. Unlimited fine. We don't want to end up there. That's just, again, it's not good for the park, it's not good for reputation, and it's not something you want to have for Park Dean Resorts. So the point I'm making is there's a whole toolkit of other options if there are any noise issues, but with the conditions that we've put forward, which we feel are appropriate and proportionate in respect of the evidence that's been put for us, I hope that we wouldn't end up there. That's it for me.
Thank you. I've got a late question from Councillor Bacon, if you're prepared to answer it.
I do apologise about this. I've got something niggling in my head says Andrea might have said something about this, but just looking at the indoor sporting events timings.
Yeah.
You're pulling it back by an hour Monday to Saturday, but trying to add an hour on Sunday. I can't quite see the logic or reasoning there. Sorry if I've missed something.
I think the indoor sporting events
indoor
was remaining as
sporting events, no
existing. There's no change there.
You did say something.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Pick that one up. Would the licensing officer like to sum up? Please.
As you heard, at this time there's no supporting evidence to confirm that noise levels are causing a nuisance, and as previously stated, this isn't a review hearing. Both of the objectors have been made aware of the environmental health function in relation to statutory noise nuisance and are now aware of the out of hours contact number for reporting issues of noise disturbance. If evidence is obtained to show that a nuisance is occurring and appropriate action isn't taken, then a review of the licence can be called, and at that stage conditions could be added to control the performance of live music, or the activity could be refused. Again, the implementation of an agreed noise management plan should avoid the need for this, and returning to the provisions of the Live Music Act, the overall capacity of the holiday park is more than 500, therefore a noise management plan would provide those assurances to responsible authorities on how the licence holder would manage the noise levels if the audience were to exceed. But I think you've heard this morning that the area probably isn't big enough to accommodate more than 500 anyway. Whilst the committee may not have powers to restrict live music as part of this application, it must still ensure that at times when other entertainment is being performed and other activities are going on, that noise levels from the outside area are managed in such a way so as to prevent public nuisance. And again, a noise management plan is likely to achieve this. The options open to the subcommittee are to grant the proposed variation of the licence as requested by the applicant, to grant the variation as requested, but with additional conditions as you may deem appropriate and proportionate to promote the objectives, or to reject the variation application. It remains the recommendation of the licensing department that option 2 is the most appropriate and that the variation should be granted subject to any additional conditions that members consider appropriate and proportionate, which are focused solely on those varied activities. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The committee will now retire to consider. Thank you. Right, thank you very much, everybody. We'll now reconvene. And I'll pass over to our legal officer, Jodie Gibson, to read out what we've decided. Do I?
Thank you. Upon receiving the report of the licensing section, the oral evidence from the applicant and the written evidence as well, the responsible authorities and other persons, and having regard to the guidance issued under Section 182 of the Licensing Act 2003 and the Isle of Wight Council's Statement of Licensing Policy 2019 to 2024, the subcommittee hereby vary the licence in accordance with the application, but modified to such an extent as members have considered appropriate for the promotion of the 4 licensing objectives, namely by requiring the following conditions. With regard to the suggested timings for each activity, for films indoors, no change. For films outdoors, varied as requested. For indoor sporting events, no change. For boxing and wrestling, either indoors or outdoors, to remain as per the existing licence. Live music and recorded music varied as requested. Late night refreshment, no change. The sale of alcohol varied as requested, save the Horsebox bar to close at 2200 hours. Additional conditions are the contact telephone number and email address to be made available to local residents. Additional hours requested for the outdoor regulated entertainment to be used between the period of 3 weeks before Good Friday and the end of October each year. A noise management plan for the outdoor regulated entertainment only. For the additional hours requested will be agreed with the environmental health officer. The noise management plan will be reviewed and updated if required at regular intervals, and a copy provided to the environmental health officer. The additional hours for regulated entertainment outdoors shall not be implemented until the noise management plan has been agreed with environmental health. These conditions are imposed as per the reasons given within the same report in order to promote the licensing objectives and in accordance with the Isle of Wight Council's Statement of Licensing Policy and the Section 182 guidance. In reaching the above decision, the subcommittee have had regard to the Human Rights Act 1998 and in particular Article 1 of the First Protocol, Article 8 and Article 6. The subcommittee consider this decision is proportionate and appropriate for the promotion of the 4 licensing objectives under the Licensing Act 2003. And there is a right of appeal to the Magistrates' Court if anyone is dissatisfied with the decision, and any appeal must be made within 21 days of the date of notification.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'd just like to thank everyone for giving their time today. Yes, thank you very much. And we will see you all later. Thank you very much.